Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey into the frozen heart of Manitoba, a land of forgotten corners, isolated small towns, endless wilderness, and places where help does not reach, to uncover 7 of the most disturbing and terrifying small-town horror stories ever told. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Manitoba, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Walker, and this happened when I was 26 years old. During a winter I still can't think about without my hands shaking. I moved to a small Manitoba town after answering a listing for a caretaker job. The pay was good, the work was simple, and the house, an old 2-story place on the edge of town, had been unoccupied for years, or so the man on the phone claimed. He sounded rushed, nervous even, like he wanted the job filled before I could ask questions. The town itself felt paused, streets too quiet, windows dark long before nightfall. People watched me unload my bags, then turned away quickly, like eye contact was a mistake. The house sat beyond the last street light, surrounded by snowdrifts taller than my chest. No nearby neighbors, no footprints leading up to the porch. The moment I unlocked the door, I noticed something wrong. The air inside wasn't stale. It was warm, and it smelled faintly of cooked food, like someone had just left the kitchen. I told myself the warmth was leftover heat from faulty radiators, maybe a timer left running. Old houses did strange things in winter. Still, I stood in the doorway longer than necessary, listening. The silence wasn't empty. It felt occupied. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The sound echoed too loudly, like the house had been waiting for it. The living room was fully furnished. Couch, coffee table, a folded blanket placed neatly at one end. Dust-free. Lived in. On the wall hung framed photographs. Families, couples, children. Different decades, judging by the clothes. But every photo had been taken inside this house. Same staircase, same doorway, same window behind them. What bothered me most was the dates written on the backs. The earliest was from the 1960s. The latest was from 3 months ago. I laughed nervously, telling myself the caretaker job probably included managing old belongings. Still, my stomach tightened when I noticed something else. In every photo, someone was missing. A blurred space, an arm cut off by the frame. Like the house didn't want to show everyone. That first night, I didn't unpack. I kept my jacket on and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the hallway that led deeper into the house. Every few minutes, the floorboards creaked upstairs, slow and deliberate, as if someone were pacing from room to room. I convinced myself it was the wood reacting to the heat. Old structures expanded. That's what I told myself, again and again. Around midnight, I heard the sound of cutlery, metal softly tapping ceramic. It was coming from the kitchen behind me. I turned slowly and saw a plate on the counter that hadn't been there before. Still steaming, mashed potatoes, gravy, and something that looked like roasted meat. A full meal, set like it was waiting for someone to sit down. My throat went dry. I hadn't unpacked food. I hadn't even turned on the stove. Then I noticed the chair across from me. It was pulled out, not dragged, not crooked, placed carefully, like someone had just stood up. And for the first time, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This house wasn't abandoned. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, watching the staircase like it might move if I blinked. Somewhere above me, Something shifted its weight. Not a creak, breathing, slow, patient. At 3:17 a.m., the television turned on by itself. Static filled the room, loud and sudden, making me jump so hard my chest burned. As I scrambled for the remote, the static cut out, replaced by a home video. A family stood in the living room where I was sitting now, smiling, nervous smiles, like they were being told to hold still. A man waved at the camera, then someone behind the camera spoke. "Don't worry," a calm voice said. "The house only takes one at a time." The video cut to black. Behind me on the staircase, a single step creaked under fresh weight. Slow, careful, descending. I didn't turn around, I already knew. The house had decided I was next. I stayed frozen in that chair until the first hint of gray crept through the windows. Whatever had come down the stairs never reached the bottom, at least not that I heard. When daylight finally broke, the house felt different, quieter, satisfied. I searched every room with a kitchen knife in my hand. No footprints in the dustless halls, no open doors, no sign of anyone living or hiding there. But in the guest bedroom upstairs, I found something that made my knees buckle. A suitcase. It was mine. Folded clothes stacked neatly inside, my toothbrush in the side pocket, even my old college hoodie washed and dried. I hadn't unpacked a single item. On the bed lay a notebook I'd never seen before. Inside were names, written carefully, one per page. Dates beside each. Some pages had only a name. Others ended mid-sentence, the ink pressed hard, as if the writer had been interrupted. The last page was blank, except for today's date, written faintly in pencil. I tried to leave. My car wouldn't start. The engine turned once, then died, like something had grabbed it from the inside. No cell signal, no internet. When I walked toward town, the road seemed longer than before, stretching unnaturally. The houses at the edge of town drifting farther away with every step. By noon, I was back at the porch without realizing I'd turned around. The front door stood open. Inside, the house felt warmer than ever, comfortable, inviting. A fire crackled in the fireplace I hadn't lit. The smell of food returned, stronger now. On the dining table sat 7 place settings. 6 were old, mismatched, worn by decades of use. The 7th was new, mine. My name card rested against the glass, written in the same careful handwriting from the notebook. That's when the realization finally crushed me. The house didn't trap people by force. It convinced them to stay. And I was already running out of reasons to leave. By evening, the house began to change its behavior toward me. The noises softened. The creaks turned rhythmic, almost soothing. When I spoke out loud, testing, desperate, it responded. Not with words, but with comfort. Lights turned on in rooms I entered. The fire flared when the cold crept into my bones. I hated myself for noticing how good it felt. I found more videos that night. Old tapes stacked carefully inside a cabinet beneath the stairs. Every tape showed a different person, different decade, different fear. But the pattern never changed. They all started nervous, joking, calling the house creepy but manageable. Then the tone shifted. Their voices lowered. Their eyes darted toward corners they tried not to look at. In the final recordings, they spoke softly, lovingly. One man pressed his palm to the wall and whispered, "It listens better than people." I shut the TV off, shaking. From inside the walls, something shifted in response. Not angry, pleased. The house didn't want obedience. It wanted acceptance. That night, I dreamed I was sitting at the dining table with the others. They were blurred, like the photographs on the wall, but I could feel them, Their presence pressed against me from every side. No one spoke. We didn't need to. The house breathed around us. When I woke, I was still at the table. My head rested against the wood. A blanket had been placed gently over my shoulders. For a terrifying moment, I didn't remember why I was afraid. Then I saw my hands. They were older, veins more pronounced, skin rougher. Days or weeks had passed. The notebook lay open in front of me. My name had been written in ink now, not pencil. Beside it was a sentence, completed in careful strokes. Stayed willingly. I screamed and threw the notebook across the room. The lights flickered. The warmth faded. For the first time since I arrived, the house felt hurt. And that was when it finally showed me what happens when someone tries to leave after being chosen. The walls began to close in, not physically, but perceptually. Doorways felt narrower. Hallways stretched longer, bending subtly when I wasn't looking straight at them. Every exit I tried led me back to the center of the house, as if the layout was being rearranged in real time. I ran upstairs, heart pounding, and found a room I hadn't seen before at the end of the hall. Inside were the missing people from the photographs. Not bodies. Impressions. Shadows pressed permanently into the walls, frozen in moments of fear, grief, or resignation. One shape reached outward, fingers elongated unnaturally, like it had tried to crawl away. Another was seated, head bowed, peaceful. I felt the house behind me then, aware, focused. The truth landed like a weight on my chest. The house didn't kill, it absorbed. It fed on presence, memory, routine. And it had been shaping me carefully, teaching me how to fit. The door behind me closed softly. Not to trap me, to finish the lesson. I don't remember escaping. I remember waking up in a hospital bed in the nearest city, my hands bruised, my throat raw from screaming. The police said a search team found me wandering the highway in a snowstorm, miles from where the house should have been. They couldn't find it. No caretaker listing, no property records, no road leading where I described. Months later, I still feel it when I stand in quiet rooms. The way silence leans closer, the way walls seem to listen. Last week, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph. Me sitting at that dining table, older, calm. On the back, written in careful handwriting, were 2 words: not finished. I sleep with the lights on now, because sometimes, just before I drift off, I swear I feel warmth returning, and the comforting sense that somewhere, the house is waiting. My name is Caleb Morris, and this happened when I was 31, during my first winter working as a utility inspector in northern Manitoba. My job was simple on paper: inspect water access points in small towns, especially older systems prone to freezing. In reality, it meant driving long, empty roads, stopping in places that felt forgotten, and spending nights in towns where people locked their doors before sunset. The town of Hollow Creek wasn't on most maps anymore. Fewer than 300 people lived there, clustered around a frozen lake that locals depended on for everything: fishing, water, identity. On my first night, the motel clerk warned me not to walk near the lake after dark. "Sound travels weird over ice," she said, forcing a smile. "Makes you hear things." I laughed it off. That night, while reviewing inspection notes, I heard it for the first time. A voice, faint, muffled, coming from beneath the frozen lake, calling my name. I stood at the motel window, staring toward the lake, telling myself exhaustion was messing with my head. Long drives, poor sleep, unfamiliar places, it all added up. Then the voice came again, clearer this time. "Caleb, help me." My stomach dropped. It wasn't distorted or ghostly. It sounded human, desperate, close. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside before I could talk myself out of it. The cold hit like a wall, sharp enough to steal my breath. The lake stretched out ahead of me, a vast sheet of ice reflecting the moon like glass. As I walked closer, the voice grew louder, but not clearer. It echoed from multiple directions at once, like it was trapped under the surface, bouncing beneath the ice. Halfway across the shoreline, I noticed something that made me stop. Footprints, bare feet. They led from the town, straight onto the lake. No return trail, and pressed faintly into the ice just beneath the surface were handprints. From the inside, I backed away from the shoreline, every instinct screaming at me to get inside. The motel clerk's warning replayed in my head, sharper now, heavier with meaning. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the ice shifting, long, hollow groans, like something rolling over beneath it. At sunrise, I went to the town office to ask questions. The receptionist went pale when I mentioned the voices. She didn't deny them. Instead, she slid a thin folder across the desk. Missing persons reports. Not tourists, not outsiders. Locals, all taken in winter, all last seen near the lake. One report mentioned a man who claimed he heard his daughter crying under the ice 3 years after she drowned. Another described a woman who walked barefoot onto the lake in the middle of a blizzard, following her husband's voice. "No bodies," the receptionist whispered. "The lake doesn't give them back." When I asked why no one fenced it off, she looked at me with tired eyes. "Because it doesn't pull," she said. "It calls." That afternoon, I inspected the intake pipes that ran beneath the lake. Old infrastructure, cracked schematics. Nothing that explained voices traveling so clearly through solid ice. As I worked, the lake went quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no ice movement, no distant town sounds. Then I heard whispering. Not one voice, many. They overlapped, tangled together, rising through the ice like breath through glass. I couldn't make out words, but I felt their intent, urgent, pleading, familiar. My mother's voice cut through the others. "Caleb, you promised you'd come home." My hands started shaking so badly I dropped my tools. My mother had died 6 years earlier. No one in Hollow Creek could have known that. The ice beneath my boots creaked, spiderweb cracks racing outward in thin white lines. I stumbled back, heart hammering, as something pressed upward from below. Slow, deliberate. The surface bulged, not breaking, testing, like whatever was beneath the lake was learning how close it could get, without letting me escape. I reported the cracking ice to the town council that evening, expecting urgency, maybe even fear. Instead, they listened in silence, exchanging looks that felt rehearsed. When I finished, the oldest man at the table leaned forward and folded his hands. "You heard someone you loved," he said calmly. It wasn't a question. He explained that the lake had been there longer than the town, longer than the first records. People used to say it was deep enough to swallow sound, memory, even grief. Over time, it learned what pulled people closest to the surface. "It doesn't lie," he said. "It uses truth." The council had rules. No one approached the lake alone. No one answered the voices. And if someone did walk onto the ice, no one followed. I asked why they let outsiders like me stay. The man's eyes lowered. "Because it gets hungry," he said, "and it prefers new voices." That night, the lake was louder than ever. And this time, it wasn't calling my name. It was thanking me for listening. I tried to leave Hollow Creek before dawn. The road out was buried under fresh snow, far more than had fallen overnight. My truck struggled, tires spinning uselessly until the engine stalled completely. When I stepped outside, the air felt heavier, like the cold had weight. The lake groaned in the distance. Then I heard footsteps behind me, bare feet crunching softly on snow. I turned slowly. A woman stood at the edge of the road, her skin pale blue, hair frozen stiff against her face. Her eyes were open but unfocused, like she was dreaming while awake. She smiled when she saw me. "I heard you," she said gently. "It lets us visit sometimes." Behind her, more shapes emerged from the snowbank. Men, women, children, all barefoot, all calm. The lake's surface in the distance rippled despite the ice. The woman stepped closer and reached for my hand. "Come listen," she whispered. "It remembers everything you've lost." And for a terrifying moment, I wanted to. I don't know what broke the spell, maybe fear, maybe instinct. But I yanked my hand back before she could touch me. The smile on her face didn't fade. It deepened, stretching unnaturally, like she was proud of me for resisting. The figures didn't chase me. They simply watched as I backed away, step by careful step, until my legs hit the truck bumper. The lake groaned again, louder now, a deep vibration that rattled my ribs. The barefoot woman turned toward the sound, her expression softening. "It's getting impatient," she said, almost apologetically. The ice cracked in the distance, a long white scar splitting the surface. Dark water welled up, steaming in the cold air. From the opening came voices, dozens at once, calling names, sharing memories, repeating moments of love and regret like bait. The woman looked back at me. "You can still leave," she said, "but it won't forget your voice." They stepped backward together, sinking into the snowbank as if the ground opened for them. And just like that, they were gone. The truck started on the first turn of the key. I didn't question it. I drove until the town disappeared behind me, until the road signs changed and the sky began to lighten. I didn't stop shaking until I crossed into the next province. Weeks later, my report was quietly closed. Cause: environmental auditory phenomena. Hollow Creek was removed from my inspection route, but the lake followed me. At night, when everything is still, I hear ice shifting, no matter where I am. In quiet rooms, my own voice sounds wrong to me, like it echoes when it shouldn't. Last winter, I woke to find wet footprints on my apartment floor, bare, leading to the bathtub. The drain was open, and from deep inside the pipes, muffled by water and metal, something whispered softly. Not calling me, repeating my name, like it was practicing. I couldn't ignore it. The whispers grew stronger every night, shaping into words, shaping into memories that weren't mine, but felt unbearably familiar. I tried recording them, telling myself I'd have proof. The microphone picked up only silence, save for the faint hum of water moving under some frozen surface. I started researching, desperate, and found stories hidden in old newspapers, people in other northern towns disappearing near frozen lakes, hearing voices from below before vanishing. The pattern was always the same. First, a familiar voice, then footsteps on the ice, then silence. One night, I dreamed I was back at Hollow Creek. The barefoot figures surrounded me on the lake, faces glowing in the moonlight. They weren't threatening. They were patient. The ice cracked beneath me, and I fell through. But instead of freezing, I floated in dark water, hearing every voice it had ever claimed. I woke gasping. Wet, though the apartment was dry, the voice whispered my name again. Caleb. It remembers. I left my apartment that night and drove as far south as I could. Every radio station, every news broadcast, every street corner was silent. The whispers followed in my mind. They had my memories now. They didn't need the ice. Last week, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a thin sheet of ice, perfectly flat with a handprint pressed into it. The handprint was mine. A note was taped to it. Next winter, we'll call again. I called friends, colleagues, even family, but no one could hear the faintest echo of what I hear. Hollow Creek doesn't exist on maps anymore. The frozen lake is gone, replaced by forest. But sometimes, when the nights are still, I hear it again. The muffled, desperate, familiar voice of someone or something beneath the ice, whispering my name. I learned the hard truth. You can run from a place, but some things follow the sound of your own voice, and they never forget. My name is Jillian Harper, and this happened when I was 28, working as a courier in rural Manitoba. I delivered packages to small towns, farmhouses, and cabins tucked deep in the woods. It was a quiet job, usually uneventful, except for the evenings when the roads disappeared into darkness, and the wind carried secrets I couldn't name. One December night, I was tasked with a delivery to a remote cabin near Blackwood Creek, a place locals avoided after sunset. The GPS led me through narrow, snow-packed tracks, the headlights cutting only a few feet into the black. Trees pressed close, their shadows long and twisting like skeletal fingers. When I reached the property, I noticed tire tracks in the snow, but they didn't match my vehicle. Fresh, single-line tracks, leading from the tree line to the cabin door, stopping abruptly. I brushed it off as someone walking home from town. But inside the cabin, the air was unnervingly still. And the instant I closed the door, I realized the tracks hadn't stopped. They were moving again. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and something older, decayed. I set down the packages, my breath fogging in the frigid air. Then I heard it, a soft, dragging sound against the snow outside. My heart jumped. The tracks. They were moving, even though no footprints appeared alongside them. I peeked through the frosted window. Nothing. The forest was still, the snow untouched. Yet the tracks led deeper into the woods, vanishing between trees where no human could walk without leaving prints. I returned to the door, locking it. That's when the whispers began. Low, raspy voices, coming from the woods, repeating fragments of my name, my thoughts, even secrets I had never spoken aloud. Panic gripped me, but curiosity and a terrible sense of inevitability forced me to listen. The voices became clearer, shaping words into sentences. You've been watched. We've waited. I realized then that the tracks weren't random. They were following me, learning me, waiting for the perfect moment to close in. I couldn't stay inside forever, but the idea of stepping outside terrified me. The dragging sounds continued, circling the cabin. Sometimes close, sometimes distant, always deliberate. My mind raced. Maybe wild animals, maybe some pranksters. But the tracks didn't match paws, boots, or tires. They were perfect solitary lines in the snow, uninterrupted, stretching off into darkness. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The beam sliced through the snow, revealing nothing but shadows and skeletal trees. Then I saw it. The tracks had doubled. Another line, almost identical, moving in parallel toward the cabin. I stumbled backward. The line outside the door stopped. The dragging noise ceased. Silence swallowed the forest. For hours, I sat gripping a kitchen knife, listening to the wind. Then, just as I thought I could breathe, I heard it again. Not outside, beneath the floorboards. Soft tapping, dragging, scraping, coming from every corner of the cabin at once. I realized the tracks weren't just outside. They were already inside. I searched the cabin, floorboards groaning beneath me. Every room looked normal. Bedroom, kitchen, living area. But the dragging sound followed. No corners were safe. Even when I crouched in the darkest shadowed corner, I could hear faint scratching right beneath my feet. I found something in the kitchen that made my stomach drop. A second set of footprints, smaller, almost childlike, pressing faintly into the snow outside the back door. They matched nothing I recognized. Not human, not animal. The dragging grew louder, closer. It wasn't random anymore. It was testing me, circling me, predicting my movements. I could hear whispers now, overlapping and incoherent, calling my full name, repeating my private thoughts I hadn't shared with anyone. I wanted to run, but the cabin felt alive. The walls pulsed with subtle vibrations, reacting to me, guiding me toward the back door. I hesitated for only a moment before the cold air outside whispered to me, promising release or death. I stepped outside, the snow crunching sharply under my boots. My flashlight trembled in my hands as the tracks led me toward the tree line. Each step I took felt guided, as if the forest itself had planted the path. The dragging sound followed, steady, unnerving, echoing against the trunks of the black pines. Then I saw something that made my blood freeze. In the snow ahead, faint handprints pressed into the white, trailing off into nothing. But they weren't human. Too elongated, too angular, claw-like at the tips. And moving parallel to them, the tracks continued, gliding smoothly over the snow, leaving no imprint, as if whatever made them didn't obey gravity. I froze. A low hiss echoed from the forest, almost a whisper, repeating my name. "I've been waiting," it said. The sound came from all directions. The trees themselves seemed alive, bending slightly toward me. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. The tracks weren't just outside, they were calling me deeper into the woods. I followed the tracks, heart hammering, every nerve screaming to turn back. The forest seemed endless, twisting unnaturally like I was walking in circles, yet the tracks always appeared ahead. The whispers became voices now, overlapping in a chorus, some familiar, some alien. "Don't be afraid," one hissed. "We know you." "Join us," another murmured, high-pitched and urgent. Branches scraped my face, snow fell from the pines in cold drifts. Every time I thought I could see the end of the path, the tracks shifted further ahead. Then I saw movement, a shadow in the corner of my flashlight beam. It didn't run, it didn't walk. It glided, dark and featureless, perfectly aligned with the tracks. I wanted to turn and flee, but a part of me wanted to see it closer, wanted to understand why the tracks existed, why the forest was alive with them. I stepped forward, and the ice-cold wind carried my name again, this time with a promise. "You are next." By now, panic had taken over my thoughts. The tracks led me to a small clearing in the woods, surrounded by twisted pines that seemed to lean inward like spectators. The dragging sound had stopped, replaced by silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. I scanned the snow with my flashlight, and that's when I saw it. Dozens of tracks converging toward me from every direction. They were impossibly straight, impossibly perfect, each one identical, moving over and around obstacles as if the forest itself obeyed them. Then I saw movement, a blur of dark shapes at the edges of the clearing. Shadows with no faces, limbs long and angular, floating just above the snow. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root, and realized the clearing wasn't empty. The trees themselves seemed alive, bending subtly to block escape. The whispers rose again, urgent, chaotic, yet strangely coordinated, calling my deepest fears aloud. It wasn't just the tracks. It was the forest. And it had me. I ran blindly toward what I thought was the edge of the clearing. The tracks shifted in real time, always keeping pace with me, reappearing ahead as if anticipating my moves. I could feel their intent, not malice exactly, but hunger, curiosity, a desire to draw me closer. Then I tripped over something buried in snow. My flashlight hit the object, a small wooden box, partially frozen. Inside were dozens of tiny figurines carved from ice, each one a miniature human, faces distorted in fear, hands raised as if begging for help. One figurine looked exactly like me. I stumbled back, horror rooting me to the snow. The whispers became coherent, one voice calm and clear. You are part of the forest now. You've been listening, following, learning. From every shadowed corner, the figures emerged, their long limbs gliding over the snow. The tracks led not just through the forest, but into me, into my mind, into my being. I don't remember exactly how I ran, only that the forest seemed to stretch endlessly, the tracks always appearing just ahead of me. Each step I took, the whispers intensified, repeating my fears, my secrets, my regrets. The shadows moved with me, gliding effortlessly over the snow, circling, observing, learning. I reached a break in the trees and thought I saw the road, a faint glimmer of my truck headlights in the distance. Relief surged until I realized the tracks had multiplied. They formed a corridor, perfectly aligned, guiding me toward the center of the forest. My mind screamed to turn back, but every instinct betrayed me. I tripped again, landing hard in the snow. Above me, the tallest shadow loomed, faceless, limbs stretched unnaturally long. The whispers combined into one voice, a chilling chant. Stay. Become part of the forest. Forever. The snow beneath me shifted like water. The tracks wrapped around me, pulling, testing, dragging. I realized then that escaping wasn't a choice. They didn't let anyone leave once followed this far. I woke in the hospital days later. No memory of escape, no explanation for how I survived. My boots were frozen solid and my body covered in frostbite, but the tracks were gone. The doctors called it hypothermia and disorientation. Friends and colleagues believed it. But I know the truth. The forest took part of me that night. A voice still calls in dreams, a whisper beneath snow and ice, repeating my secrets, replaying my fears. My hands sometimes feel cold, numb, as if I am still walking through those trees. Last winter, I returned to the region. Carefully, legally sticking to the main highways. Yet, even there, near the outskirts, I saw faint tracks in fresh snow, perfectly straight, as if reminding me that the forest remembers me, and I belong to it now. I avoid quiet roads in winter. I avoid forests. And I never, ever follow tracks, because they never stop following you. My name is Ethan Clark, and this happened when I was 26, delivering mail for small towns in rural Manitoba. Some routes were short, some stretched for miles through dense forests and frozen rivers. That winter, I was assigned to Ravens Hollow, a town so remote it barely appeared on maps. The most unnerving part of my route was a wooden bridge spanning the frozen Hollow Creek. The locals called it the Vanishing Bridge, joking or maybe warning about its strange nature. They said that at night, It sometimes disappeared, not physically, but perceptually. Drivers claimed to see it shift, elongate, or vanish completely, leaving only ice and darkness. On my first night driving there alone, the wind was biting and snow swirled in blinding sheets. I approached the bridge cautiously, headlights slicing through the darkness. I slowed to a crawl, and then I realized something was wrong. The bridge seemed too long, too empty. The planks beneath my wheels stretched farther than they should have, and in the distance, darkness consumed the end. I should have turned back, but I didn't. As I drove, the bridge seemed alive. Each plank groaned under the tires, yet there was no wind strong enough to cause it. Shadows stretched along the rails, moving in ways that defied the light. My radio crackled once, then went dead, leaving only the sound of tires and the ice below. Then I noticed something impossible. On either side of the bridge, faint footprints appeared in the snow, perfectly spaced, parallel to my path. No one was walking, no animals. Yet the prints advanced as I moved, keeping pace. Panic surged, but curiosity, or madness, kept me going. The planks ahead warped subtly, bending in ways that should have been impossible. I could see the faint outline of the bridge's end, but every time I blinked, it shifted farther away. I tried turning around, but the bridge seemed to stretch endlessly behind me as well. I was trapped in a frozen corridor suspended between reality and something else entirely. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles whitened. The bridge creaked under the truck, long groans echoing into the darkness. Snow whipped across the windshield, yet in the side mirrors, the forest appeared unnaturally still, as if frozen in time. The footprints had multiplied, faintly glowing in the headlights, forming a perfect corridor around my vehicle. Then I noticed movement beyond the tracks, shadows flickering just at the edge of the bridge. They weren't human. Their forms were tall, impossibly thin, limbs bending at strange angles. They hovered slightly above the snow, gliding silently beside my truck as if inspecting me. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the bridge stretched endlessly, trapping me. When I slowed, the shadows matched my speed. When I accelerated, they matched it too, their presence constant, omnipresent. A cold whisper echoed in my ear. "You can't leave." Not yet. I realized that the vanishing bridge wasn't broken, wasn't disappearing. It was feeding, learning, testing every traveler who dared cross it at night. Panic overtook me. I slammed the brakes, but the truck slid on ice as if the bridge itself resisted stopping. The shadows drew closer, stretching impossibly, their elongated limbs grazing the sides of my vehicle without touching. I tried to scream, but the wind swallowed my voice. I looked down at the headlights' reflection in the ice beneath the bridge. My own eyes stared back at me, except they weren't mine. The pupils were black, bottomless voids, and faint echoes of whispering voices emanated from them, repeating my deepest fears aloud. Suddenly, the snow around the truck shifted like water. Tracks formed around the tires, wrapping, spiraling, guiding me. I realized the bridge wasn't just testing me. It was pulling me, bending reality, making the road itself a living trap. I forced my eyes forward. In the distance, the end of the bridge seemed impossibly far, but faint light shimmered there. An illusion or a promise? I couldn't tell. I had to keep moving. There was no turning back. The wind howled through the bridge, carrying with it faint whispers that sounded like dozens of voices layered together. I couldn't distinguish words, only emotion, mockery, impatience, hunger. My flashlight flickered, throwing grotesque shadows onto the ice beneath the bridge. And for a moment, I thought the planks themselves were moving, bending like the ribs of some giant frozen creature. The shadows hovered closer now, perfectly synchronized with my truck. Their elongated fingers, or whatever they were, tapped lightly against the rails as if testing me. I tried to focus on the distant light at the end, but it warped every time I blinked. The bridge seemed to stretch endlessly, and with each heartbeat, the weight of the snow and ice pressed against me. A loud groan rang through the bridge, like wood cracking under immense pressure. My tires spun uselessly on the slick surface, and I realized the bridge wasn't just frozen. It was alive, resisting, and it had me trapped in its frozen grip. I tried to force the truck forward, praying the end of the bridge would finally arrive. Every attempt felt futile. The headlights revealed more shadows, this time forming patterns I couldn't understand. Lines, spirals, concentric circles of darkness moving in tandem with the planks. The whispers grew louder, now distinguishable as words. Step too far. Stay. Belong. My pulse was racing, my hands trembling as the steering wheel froze under my grip. Suddenly, a plank cracked beneath the truck, sending a shiver through the vehicle. The shadows surged closer, bending and stretching unnaturally, and I realized they weren't just beside me. They were under me, guiding every motion, dictating the path. I felt a pull, strong, invisible, like gravity had shifted toward the center of the bridge. My mind screamed, "Run! Escape!" But my body obeyed the bridge, sliding forward on its icy, living surface. Somewhere in the distance, a faint light shimmered. But I no longer knew if it was the end or another trap. By now, my mind was fraying. The bridge stretched endlessly, yet somehow I sensed the end drawing closer, though it shifted every time I blinked. The shadows hovered in perfect alignment with the truck, their elongated forms bending unnaturally, brushing the rails, but never falling. Every sound, the creak of wood, the wind through the pines, the faint crunch of snow, was amplified, echoing like a chorus of madness around me. Then I saw it. A figure at the far end of the bridge, humanoid but impossibly tall, draped in shadows that moved like liquid. It raised a hand, and the tracks in the snow beneath my truck began to writhe, curling around the tires as if trying to consume them. I could feel the bridge itself pulsing, alive, guiding me toward the figure, toward the impossible end. My chest tightened, breath catching. The whispers became a single commanding voice. Almost, "Here. Belong." And the darkness ahead warped, the planks bending in anticipation of what it wanted from me. I tried to look away, to turn the truck around, but the bridge resisted. Every move I made forward, the planks beneath me seemed to stretch, elongating the distance. The shadows followed with perfect precision, silent, patient, and inevitable. My hands shook violently on the wheel, my teeth chattering, yet I couldn't stop. The figure at the end raised both arms now, and the snow tracks reacted, moving like ribbons in the wind, wrapping around my tires, pulling me forward. I could feel it in my bones. The bridge wanted me to reach that figure, wanted me to become part of its frozen, endless structure. I screamed, but the wind stole my voice. Time warped, seconds felt like hours. The light at the end of the bridge shimmered unnaturally, bright yet distant, calling me, promising an answer I wasn't sure I wanted. I knew then the bridge wasn't just a path. It was a test. And I was the prey. I was trembling uncontrollably as the truck inched forward. The bridge pulsed beneath me, each plank groaning like the bones of some ancient creature. The shadows had multiplied now, stretching out on either side, flanking me like sentinels. their faceless forms bent unnaturally toward the truck, observing, measuring, whispering in voices that were my own. Echoes of thoughts I had never spoken aloud. The figure at the far end raised a hand again, and the snow tracks responded, writhing around my tires, almost alive. My mind screamed at me to stop, to reverse, to abandon everything. But the planks resisted, shifting beneath the tires, compelling me forward. Every heartbeat was mirrored by the whispering, almost belong, forever. Then the bridge lurched violently, ice cracking under the weight of reality itself. I saw the end, a faint shimmer of light. But it wasn't salvation. It was a doorway, and the figure stretched toward me, beckoning. I realized with horror that the bridge wasn't just guiding me, it was claiming me. The next moment was a blur. The bridge seemed to stretch and collapse simultaneously, planks bending and snapping beneath the truck. I felt an invisible force lift me slightly, guiding the vehicle forward as the shadows converged, faceless hands brushing my windows, cold enough to burn. My mind screamed for escape, but I was no longer entirely in control. Then, with a final, bone-chilling groan, the truck crossed the last visible plank. The shadows vanished, the snow tracks faded, and the distant lights solidified into the normal, quiet road I had known. My heart pounded, and frostbite bit my fingers and cheeks. But I had made it. I never spoke of the vanishing bridge to anyone. Locals still cross it at night, and I see news of travelers lost in that region. I know the truth. The bridge waits, stretching and bending, testing those who cross it after dark. And one day, it will call me back. I avoid winter roads now, especially bridges that seem too long, too quiet, too alive. My name is Lucas Fraser, and this happened when I was 29. I had always been drawn to abandoned places, photographing forgotten structures across rural Manitoba. That winter, I heard about an old hunting cabin deep in hollow pines, a forest so dense that cell service didn't exist, and snow covered the ground for weeks at a time. Locals whispered it was cursed, though no one said why. Curiosity won over caution, and I packed my gear to document it. The path to the cabin was treacherous. Snow drifts swallowed footprints, and the wind carried a strange, almost metallic scent. When I finally reached the clearing, I saw the cabin. Rotting wood, a collapsed porch, windows clouded with grime. A thin plume of smoke rose from the chimney, though I could see no sign of life. I stepped closer, and the forest fell silent. No wind, no birds, not even the distant creak of trees. A faint whisper grazed my ears, soft, indistinct, almost like someone breathing my name from inside the cabin. I approached the cabin cautiously, camera ready, but a feeling of being watched settled in my chest. The snow beneath my boots was crisp, yet I noticed faint footprints near the doorway. Too fresh, though I hadn't seen anyone. The whispering continued, faint but urgent, almost like it wanted me to enter. Inside, the air was thick, musty, and strangely warm. My flashlight revealed a living room covered in dust, old furniture overturned, and the remnants of a fire long extinguished. But what caught my eye were the walls, etched with symbols, sharp and jagged, as if clawed by something with immense strength. Then I heard it, a soft tapping on the roof, steady, deliberate, like footsteps pacing back and forth. The cabin creaked unnaturally with each tap, and the whispering became a chorus of voices, repeating fragments of my own thoughts. I realized then, the cabin wasn't abandoned. Something, or someone, was here, and it had been waiting. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself it was my imagination. But the tapping continued, slow, methodical, echoing across the ceiling beams. Each step sounded heavier than the last, as though the roof itself bore a weight far beyond what it should hold. I shined my flashlight upward, revealing nothing but darkness, yet I felt eyes boring into me from above. Then I heard a voice, low and guttural, speaking my name. It wasn't human. It rattled the timbers and made the glass windows vibrate. My camera flashed, illuminating the corners of the cabin, but each time, shadows darted just out of sight. The carvings on the walls seemed to writhe, twisting in the beam of light, forming shapes that mimicked my own body, my posture, my fear. I wanted to leave, but the doorway I had entered through now appeared farther away, as if the cabin itself had grown larger, trapping me inside. The whispering grew louder, almost insistent, guiding me deeper into the heart of the structure. I forced myself to move deeper into the cabin, heart hammering. The floorboards groaned beneath each step, echoing through the empty space like a warning. I noticed a door at the far end of the living room, one I hadn't seen before. The wood was blackened and scratched, and a faint heat radiated from behind it, like something alive breathing. As I approached, the whispers intensified, chanting fragments of my memories, things only I could know. I froze. The tapping above became synchronized with my heartbeat, then faster, louder, as if urging me to step through the door. I opened it slowly. Inside, a narrow hallway stretched endlessly, lined with more symbols carved into the walls. The air was thicker here, suffocating, and the temperature dropped sharply. A dark mist swirled along the floor, and at the far end, I glimpsed a shadow moving, tall, faceless, gliding just above the ground. It was waiting for me. I stepped into the hallway, the air heavy and suffocating, each breath tasting of ash and something metallic. The shadow at the end didn't move toward me. It simply glided there, impossible and patient. I felt compelled to walk forward, my legs moving as if guided by an unseen hand. The carvings on the walls seemed alive, pulsating in rhythm with the whispering, which now spoke in my own voice, repeating secrets I had never shared. A sudden cold gust slammed the door behind me shut, and I spun around. The cabin had changed. The living room I had entered from now appeared miles away, impossibly small, as if the house itself was breathing, reshaping its dimensions. Panic surged, but the shadow remained still, waiting. I noticed faint footprints in the dust, small, elongated, claw-like, leading straight to the figure. They didn't belong to me, yet they matched my pace. I realized with a sinking dread, the cabin wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and I was already inside its grasp. I pressed forward despite every instinct screaming to run. The shadow pulsed subtly, almost as if acknowledging my presence. The whispers rose in volume, chanting my name, recounting my fears and mistakes, forcing me to confront memories I had buried deep. Every step I took, the hallway stretched further, making it impossible to reach the figure, yet impossible to stop moving. Then, a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard. A low, grinding hum emanating from the walls themselves. The carvings vibrated violently, glowing brighter, sending shadows dancing across the mist. My flashlight flickered, revealing glimpses of figures, dozens of faceless silhouettes pressed into the walls, all reaching toward me with long, thin arms. I stumbled, tripping over one of the faint clawed footprints, and realized the shadow wasn't just waiting. It was testing me, probing for weakness. I understood then. The cabin didn't just want to scare me. It wanted me to belong to it, to become another shadow among its endless walls. My heart pounded as I forced myself to keep moving. The hallway stretched endlessly, the shadows flickering and elongating with each step. Every carved symbol on the walls seemed to writhe in my flashlight's beam, forming faces, hands, shapes that mimicked me. I realized I was no longer alone. The silhouettes pressed in, mirroring every movement, whispering every thought I had tried to keep private. The faceless figure at the far end raised an arm, and the shadows along the walls began to pulse in unison, like the beating of a monstrous heart. The mist along the floor thickened, curling around my ankles, pulling at me. I stumbled, but the floor itself seemed to bend beneath my feet, stretching the corridor, twisting it, forcing me onward. I understood then that the cabin was not simply haunted, it was sentient. It watched, it learned, and it tested. One wrong move, and it could trap me forever. Another ghost in its walls. I stumbled forward, heart racing, sweat freezing on my brow despite the cold air. The faceless figure didn't move, yet the shadows and mist reacted as though anticipating my every step. The whispers now formed sentences, commands, warnings, insults, all directed at me, digging into my memories and fears. I could feel the cabin's presence pressing in from all sides, the floorboards shifting, the walls bending, the ceiling lowering in subtle increments. Ahead, the corridor narrowed suddenly, forcing me into a tight space. The faceless figure loomed larger, and I felt compelled to look directly at it. Its form twisted, bending light and shadow around it, and the mist at my feet coalesced into small, clawed figures reaching toward me. I could hear the heartbeat of the cabin now, steady, deliberate, resonating through my chest. I realized in that instant, the cabin wasn't just a location, it was a predator, and I had entered its hunting grounds willingly. I felt the walls closing in, the corridor twisting tighter around me. The whispering voices became deafening, echoing every secret, every fear, every regret I had ever tried to bury. The mist at my feet swirled violently, clawed figures rising higher, reaching toward my legs, my arms, tugging at me. The faceless figure at the far end of the corridor stretched impossibly, its limbs bending in ways that defied physics, beckoning me forward. I tried to turn back, but the hallway had no end in sight. The carvings along the walls glowed brighter, their shapes twisting into faces that screamed in silence. Every step I took felt heavier, as if invisible hands pressed on my shoulders, pushing me toward the figure. My camera slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor, and in that moment, I understood. The cabin didn't want me to leave. It wanted me to see, to understand, to submit. Fear clawed at my chest, but the pull of the figure was irresistible. I was trapped, alone, and completely at its mercy. I reached the end of the corridor, and the faceless figure didn't move. The mist swirled violently, forming a vortex that seemed to pull at my very soul. I felt my body lifting slightly, my legs moving without control, drawn forward by a force older than reason. Then, a deafening silence fell. The whispers vanished, the mist receded, and the hallway collapsed in on itself like it had never existed. I woke outside the cabin at dawn, snow crunching beneath my feet. The door was gone, the walls flattened into the clearing, the forest quiet as if nothing had ever been there. My camera lay beside me, frozen, its screen cracked, but the photos it had taken, they were of me, inside the hallway, walking past shadows, faceless figures reaching for me. I never returned to Hollow Pines, and I never spoke of the cabin. But I know it waits, reshaping itself in silence, patient, sentient, ready for the next curious soul to enter its hunting grounds. My name is Maya Reynolds, and this happened when I was 24. I had traveled to Manitoba's northern lakes to film ice fishing for a small online channel. The lake I chose was remote, frozen solid, and surrounded by dense pine forests, untouched by civilization. Locals warned me never to go alone after dark, but I was determined. The day was bitterly cold, the wind slicing across the ice like knives. I set up my equipment near the center of the lake, a small hole drilled for fishing. As night fell, the forest disappeared into blackness, and the only light came from my headlamp and the faint shimmer of the ice under the moon. Then I noticed movement at the edge of my vision, a tall figure standing on the far side of the lake. At first, I thought it was another angler, but no tracks led to it. The figure remained motionless, watching perfectly still, yet impossibly human-like. A chill not from the cold ran through me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a tree or a trick of the moonlight. But every time I glanced up, the figure had moved closer, yet no footprints marred the smooth ice. My breath came out in clouds, and the wind seemed to carry whispers, distant but insistent, like something calling my name. I grabbed my camera, thinking to record the figure, but the lens fogged instantly, freezing over as if the cold itself rejected it. The figure didn't flinch, didn't wave, didn't even blink. It simply stood there, observing. I noticed its shape was slightly wrong. Too long in the limbs, too narrow in the torso, posture unnaturally rigid. Then it stepped forward. Or maybe it glided. The ice didn't crack beneath it. And the moment it moved, my skin crawled. The sound of frozen ice groaning echoed not from the lake, but from inside my head. My hands shook as I tried to focus on my camera screen. The figure hadn't moved closer in a straight line. It shifted almost imperceptibly, appearing slightly to the left, then right. Yet no footprints marred the ice. I could feel it studying me, and a deep unease settled in my chest. The wind carried a low hum, almost melodic, vibrating through the ice beneath my feet. I considered leaving, but my sled was on the opposite side, and the journey back would take me across the expanse of ice where the figure now hovered silently. Every instinct screamed to run, yet my legs felt heavy, rooted as though the ice itself resisted me. The whispers intensified, becoming a chorus of syllables I couldn't understand but instinctively feared. Suddenly, the figure tilted its head, and I noticed its eyes, dark, void-like, reflecting nothing of the world around it. I realized with horror it wasn't human. Something ancient, something patient, had been waiting on this frozen lake, watching, learning, and now I was its focus. I backed away slowly, trying to maintain eye contact while plotting a path to my sled. The figure didn't move toward me, yet the sense of threat intensified. Its posture was rigid, yet fluid, unnatural, like it existed slightly out of sync with reality. The hum became louder, vibrating through the ice in my bones, synchronizing with my heartbeat. I scanned the ice around me and noticed subtle distortions, ripples in the frost, faint cracks forming in impossible shapes, as though the lake itself responded to the figure's presence. Shadows stretched unnaturally from the trees onto the ice, merging with the figure, creating a distorted silhouette that seemed to double and triple in size. Panic threatened to overtake me, but I knew running blindly would be worse. I moved cautiously, step by step, and the figure mirrored me in silence, always maintaining the same distance. Every second stretched endlessly. The frozen lake had become a stage, and I was trapped in a performance I did not want to participate in. I inched closer to my sled, heart hammering, knowing that one wrong step could shatter the fragile ice beneath me. The figure remained perfectly still, its elongated limbs stretching slightly with each step I took. The whispers had intensified into a low, unending chant, filling my mind with a cold, creeping dread. I could almost feel its gaze burrowing into my skull, dissecting every memory, every fear. Suddenly, the ice cracked behind me. Just a faint, delicate line at first. But it grew rapidly, racing toward the center of the lake. Panic surged through me. I didn't need the whispers to tell me that the ice beneath the figure didn't crack. Something unnatural was holding it aloft. My instincts screamed at me to run, but the figure seemed to command the lake itself. Every step toward my sled felt heavier. The air thickened, and the figure tilted its head once more, observing me with those void-like eyes. I realized then that leaving wouldn't be simple. The lake wanted me to stay, to become part of it. I finally reached my sled, fumbling to grab it while keeping my eyes on the figure. The ice groaned under my weight, a sound far too loud in the dead silence of the forested lake. The whispers had grown into a cacophony, speaking in tones I couldn't understand but instinctively feared. My breath came out in thick clouds, freezing instantly in the frigid air, and my hands shook as I clutched the sled's rope. The figure moved suddenly, not toward me, but its shadow stretched across the ice, bending unnaturally, reaching out as if trying to ensnare me. I could feel the lake shifting subtly beneath my feet, the ice groaning and cracking in a rhythm that matched the whispers, as though alive. My stomach churned with terror. I realized then the figure was not just a watcher. It was a guardian of this frozen expanse, and I had trespassed. The lake itself was a trap, and I had to escape before it claimed me completely. I dragged the sled forward, each step a battle against the ice's unnatural pull. The whispers became a chorus of fragmented words, echoing my own thoughts back at me, twisting them into something terrifying. I glanced at the figure again. It hadn't moved physically, but its shadow now seemed to ripple across the ice like liquid, elongating, splitting, and merging with the darkness around it. The fissures in the ice grew longer, racing toward me from the center of the lake. I realized with a jolt that if the cracks reached me, there was no telling what would happen. The cold no longer felt natural. It was invasive, gnawing at my skin and bones. My headlamp flickered violently, revealing glimpses of dozens of shadowy figures emerging along the tree line, indistinct and elongated, sliding across the ice with a silent, predatory grace. I understood then that the figure at the lake's edge wasn't alone. The entire frozen expanse had awakened, and I was at the center of its hunting ground. I forced myself to keep moving, every muscle trembling, every nerve screaming to stop. The ice groaned under the weight of the cracks, a sound like the earth itself fracturing. The shadow figure remained still, yet the mist at its feet began to rise and coalesce into shapes, tall, clawed, faceless forms that mirrored it perfectly. They didn't advance, yet their presence was suffocating, stretching across the ice like a living darkness. The whispers now formed coherent phrases, echoing in my mind. Stay, belong, never leave. I realized with dread that this frozen lake had claimed countless others before me, each now a memory trapped within the ice, feeding the watcher. Panic surged, but my instinct for survival overpowered it. I gripped the sled tighter and sprinted toward the far edge of the lake, the fissures snapping behind me, shadows stretching to intercept my path, the air thick with the cold, unnatural hum of something ancient and patient. The shore finally appeared ahead, a faint line of trees silhouetted against the cold morning light. My legs burned, lungs heaving, but I didn't dare stop. The shadows on the ice stretched impossibly, clawed forms writhing as if trying to pull me back. The whispering escalated into a deafening roar inside my mind, every word a demand. Stay. Belong. Join us. I glanced back at the figure. It hadn't moved an inch physically, yet its presence had grown, filling the entire frozen expanse with a dark, oppressive force. The mist coalesced into writhing forms that mirrored my own movements, as if the lake was studying me, learning, cataloging my every action. My heart nearly stopped when I saw a hand. No, dozens of hands emerging from the ice, reaching, clawing, just barely missing me. I forced myself to sprint the last few feet, the sled scraping behind me, adrenaline driving me forward. The edge of the forest felt impossibly distant, yet I had no choice but to escape its watchful gaze. I tumbled into the forest, snow crunching beneath my boots, my body shaking from cold and terror. I dared not look back, yet I felt the oppressive presence of the lake and its watcher lingering, patient, observing. When I finally risked a glance, the frozen expanse appeared calm, undisturbed, as if nothing had existed. No cracks, no shadows, no figure. I spent hours stumbling toward civilization, the echoes of whispers lingering in my mind. My camera, frozen solid, revealed only static when I later checked the footage. Yet one frame froze my blood, a faint shadow on the ice, elongated, faceless, watching, always watching. I never returned to that lake. The locals' warnings had been true. The frozen lake watcher waits, patient, silent, guarding its domain. And if you ever stray too far onto its ice, it will find you, and you will become part of its eternal vigil. My name is Liam Carter, and this happened when I was 19. I had just moved to a small town in Manitoba, taking a night shift at the local train station. The building was old, nearly a century in age, with creaking floors, drafty corners, and long corridors that seemed to swallow sound. Locals whispered about the station being haunted, but I didn't believe in ghosts. Until my first night alone. The station was quiet at first, only the occasional groan of the tracks under distant trains. I patrolled the platforms, sweeping my flashlight across empty waiting areas. Then I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps echoing from the main corridor, though I was alone. They were slow, deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth. But whenever I turned, no one was there. A chill ran down my spine. The air smelled faintly of smoke and iron, though no fires burned. Then came the whispers, low, urgent, almost pleading. I had no idea they were coming from the station itself, until a shadow flickered across the wall behind me. I called out, but my voice was swallowed by the cavernous station. The footsteps continued, echoing but never approaching. I followed them down the main corridor, the air growing colder with every step. My flashlight flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that twisted across the walls. Suddenly, the old clock in the station chimed midnight, though the time was clearly off. The echoes of its bell resonated unnaturally, and the whispers rose in volume, forming half words, phrases I couldn't understand, but felt in my chest. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind me, though every window and entrance was locked tight. I froze. Then I saw it. A figure at the end of the hallway, tall, hunched slightly, with no discernible features, yet unmistakably human in shape. It didn't move toward me, yet I felt its gaze, cold, patient, and accusatory. I realized with a jolt that this station had secrets, dark, lingering, and very much alive. I forced myself to move forward, each step echoing unnaturally against the walls. The figure didn't move, yet a heavy sense of scrutiny weighed on me, as if it could read my thoughts. The whispers swelled, almost forming words I could understand. Warnings, accusations, fragments of a story I had never lived, but somehow knew. The air grew colder, and my breath came out in thick clouds. The old floorboards creaked under my weight, though I could have sworn the footsteps behind me didn't match my pace. Shadows stretched along the corridor, bending unnaturally, forming shapes that mimicked my movements. Every corner seemed deeper than it should, the walls narrowing and expanding subtly, disorienting me. I tried calling out again, my voice trembling, but only the echoes of the clock answered. The faceless figure remained motionless, a dark sentinel at the far end. I realized then that the station itself was alive, and this figure was its guardian, ensuring that no secrets were ever forgotten and no trespasser left unmarked. I moved cautiously, trying to keep the figure in sight without letting it feel I was afraid. The whispers grew louder, shaping into urgent, fragmented phrases like, "Don't leave. Stay. Remember." The words clawed at my mind, forcing memories I didn't know I had to the surface, filling me with dread. Suddenly, the sound of the tracks outside changed, a rhythmic clatter that wasn't part of any schedule. I looked toward the windows, but the platforms were empty. Then I noticed the walls. Faint faces pressed into the paint, twisted in silent screams, eyes following my every movement. The station was showing me its history, its secrets, the countless souls it had swallowed over decades. I stumbled backward, tripping over a loose floorboard, and the faceless figure tilted its head as if observing my fear. I realized with chilling clarity that it didn't need to approach me physically. Its presence alone could manipulate everything. The air, the shadows, even my own thoughts. I forced myself to rise, my hands shaking, and moved toward the ticket counter to grab my flashlight again. The whispers had turned into a low, incessant chant, echoing through the station like the murmurs of 1,000 lost souls. Every step I took made the floorboards groan, yet the sound didn't match my pace. Something in the station was moving independently, bending reality around me. The faceless figure remained motionless at the end of the corridor, yet its presence pressed against me like a living wall. Shadows along the walls stretched unnaturally, curling toward me like fingers, and the cold seeped deep into my bones. I realized that the station wasn't just haunted, it was hungry. Hungry for attention, for acknowledgement, for fear. Every object, every shadow, every echo had a purpose: to ensnare intruders like me. I gripped the counter tightly, willing myself to act. The door at the far end was my only escape, yet each step forward felt like walking through a dream where gravity and time had no rules, and the station controlled every motion. I finally reached the far door, my chest heaving and hands numb. The whispers were a deafening hum in my mind, repeating fragmented commands and cryptic warnings. I pulled at the handle, but it didn't budge. Panic surged as the shadows along the corridor thickened, merging into shapes that resembled the figure at the end. Tall, faceless, and impossibly rigid. I turned, hoping to find another exit, but the corridor stretched endlessly, as if the station had rearranged itself. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in near total darkness. The faceless figure glided closer, or perhaps I was moving closer to it. The station distorted all perception. The chanting whispers now became a single voice. "You belong here. Forever." With a surge of adrenaline, I slammed my shoulder into the door. It burst open, and I fell into the night air, gasping and trembling. Behind me, the station loomed silently, unchanging, patient, and eternally hungry. I stumbled out onto the empty platform, the cold night air biting through my coat. My heart pounded, every nerve screaming that I had narrowly escaped something beyond comprehension. The station stood behind me, dark and silent, but I could still feel its presence pressing from the shadows, lingering, patient. I turned toward the tracks, hoping to find a passing train to carry me away. But the rails were empty, stretching into the darkness without end. Then I noticed faint shapes along the tracks. Elongated, shadowy figures moving with unnatural grace, gliding along the rails without sound. I froze, realizing they were watching, waiting, reflecting the faceless figure from inside the station. The whispers returned, not inside my mind this time, but carried on the wind, faint and almost melodic. You cannot leave. You cannot hide. You cannot forget. Panic surged, but my legs obeyed instinct, carrying me forward along the platform, every sense alert, every shadow a potential threat. I understood then that the station's influence extended far beyond its walls. I ran along the platform, trying to put distance between myself and the station. But the elongated shadows seemed to extend endlessly, merging with the darkness around me. Each step I took echoed unnaturally, as if the station itself were repeating them in the distance, mocking my attempts to escape. I glanced back at the station. Its windows glowed faintly, though no lights had ever been on, and the shape of the faceless figures seemed pressed against the glass, observing. The whispers carried on the night wind became more urgent, more personal. Remember us. Remember what you saw. Belong. My breath came out in icy clouds, and the night air seemed to thicken, almost resisting my movement. The platform stretched farther than it should, curving subtly, as if I was trapped in a loop. I realized with terror that leaving the station physically did not mean escaping its grasp. It had followed me into the night. I reached the end of the platform, where the forest beyond the tracks began. My lungs burned from the cold and exertion, and every muscle in my body screamed to stop. But the station wasn't done with me. The shadows along the platform thickened, stretching toward the edge like reaching hands, each one a twisted mirror of the faceless figure inside. The whispers had grown into a chorus, each voice distinct yet unified, repeating my name, recounting memories I hadn't shared with anyone, twisting them into warnings. I realized with horror that the station didn't just haunt its walls, it haunted the mind, following anyone who dared enter. A faint glow appeared from the other side of the tracks. A train? A chance to escape? My legs carried me forward, slipping over the icy platform. The shadows recoiled slightly, but never vanished. My chest tightened as I realized the station's grasp extended far beyond its physical form. Escape was possible, but I would never truly be free. I finally leapt across the tracks and fell into the forest, snow crunching under my boots, my body trembling from adrenaline and terror. I dared not look back, yet I could still feel the station's presence, a lingering weight pressing against the night air, patient and eternal. When I later recounted the story, the locals nodded knowingly. The station had claimed countless souls over the decades, and though many escaped physically, they never truly left. It followed, etched into memory, shadows and whispers. Even now, whenever I hear a train whistle far away, I feel its eyes on me. The faceless figure, the stretching shadows, and the haunting whispers remain a part of me, a reminder that some places, some buildings, are alive, and some darkness refuses to let go. The haunted train station waits, patient, silent, and eternally vigilant.